At the age of 16, I was evicted from my family home to accommodate the arrival of my sister's newborn child. I subsequently published an online account of the circumstances, which prompted my father to plead with his parents for their intervention. However, they were not willing to intervene on his behalf. I recently celebrated my 16th birthday, yet there was no celebration, and my parents barely acknowledged my birthday before evicting me from the family residence. The reason behind this decision was my older sister, Amanda, who is 22 years old. She has always been my parents' favorite child, and has always been so. She is currently 7 months pregnant. Given that our house has 4 bedrooms, my parents informed me on the morning of my birthday that they now wanted me to move to my aunt's house so that the new baby could have the room. My parents have never really cared about me and have always done the bare minimum when it came to me. This was a surprising turn of events, even for me. I had not anticipated that my parents would make such a request of me. Throughout the conversation, they were quite serious, so I did not believe for a moment that they were joking or that this was a pathetic attempt to prank me. After they had explained to me that they needed the new room and that it was explained to me that I was old enough to move out. We sat in silence for a while. It was stated that I would still be provided with all my expenses until I turned 18 and that I would be well fed and looked after. However, it was explained that I could no longer live with them in the same home. I did not wish to argue, but I did ask why they could not simply use the guest room for the nursery. The response was as follows. After some hesitation, my parents informed me that they had previously used the room for Amanda's boyfriend to stay with them. In summary, my parents had a room of their own, my sister and her boyfriend had a room, and her baby would have its own room. Amanda was not at home, and I could tell that this was on purpose so that she would not have to witness this situation and feel guilty. My sister and I were never close because of the age difference. However, she had never been particularly unkind to me either. We were generally civil to one another, but if she was content with this arrangement and genuinely wished for me to leave the house so that she could accommodate her new baby and boyfriend, then perhaps she was not the person I had previously believed her to be. I was disillusioned and even more so because it was my birthday, but I did not say a word to them. I had already come to the realization that my parents were not going to change their minds about this matter. I had accepted that they would never love me, and I had come to terms with the situation. When they told me that they wanted me to move out and live with my aunt, I went up to my room and started packing. They helped me pack, but I think it was just to help me get out quickly after I was done. They dropped me at my aunt's house and engaged in conversation with me throughout the car ride. However, they failed to recognize that I was not responding and was merely gazing out the window. Upon our arrival, they dropped me off at the doorstep and did not even offer a hug or kiss before leaving. My aunt, on the other hand, welcomed me with great enthusiasm, indicating that she genuinely enjoys my company and, to the best of my knowledge, loves me more than my parents do. I spoke with her about my parents and expressed my disappointment with their actions. She appeared taken aback by my words and requested that I repeat what I had said. I did so, and her demeanor shifted from one of pleasantry to one of displeasure. She did not respond verbally, but instead reached for her phone and began to speak on the phone. She was compelled to make a telephone call and proceeded to the adjacent room. I did not hear any further sounds for a considerable period of time, but then I discerned the sound of my aunt engaged in a heated verbal altercation on the telephone in a high-pitched voice. This was a rare occurrence, as my aunt was known to rarely ever raise her voice at others and was generally regarded as a person of great composure. Consequently, I was led to conclude that she must have been extremely displeased by the other party's conduct for her to have lost her temper to such an extent. She then re-entered the room. She was visibly upset and still seemed annoyed. I learned that it was my parents who had upset her, so my father informed her that I had suggested this arrangement for the benefit of the baby. I was pleased to move out of my childhood home to live with my aunt. This was why she had been amenable to taking me in as well, since it was evident that I had never been genuinely content residing with my parents. Consequently, my suggestion did not appear unusual to her when my father attempted to persuade her to take me in. She is a single woman in her late 30s and has no intention of marrying or having children, so allowing me to live with her was merely akin to having a roommate for her. Moreover, she did not have to concern herself with the financial implications. My living arrangements were not a source of concern for my aunt, as she was aware that my father would be covering all of my expenses. She was also aware that I wanted to live with her, which is why she agreed to this arrangement. However, after learning the truth, she contacted my father to express her displeasure. She felt that what they had done was inappropriate and that she needed to express her thoughts to them. My aunt was visibly upset, as was I. I had never previously considered that any other child my age would experience such a situation. I had always known that my sister was more favored by my parents than I was, but this was a rather extreme example of parental favoritism. My aunt had been deceived by my parents to cover up their actions, as they were aware of the negative impact of their behavior. My parents had even chosen to give up their guest room for my sister's boyfriend, who was in his 20s and had his own apartment. The 20-year-old has a job and lives in his own apartment. If they wanted to make it work, Amanda could have easily moved in with her boyfriend. However, it was at my parents' insistence that she'd been living at home. They wanted to be closer to her and were willing to sacrifice my comfort just to keep her close. I was very hurt by this, and so I decided to go online and expose my parents, for I was uncertain as to the extent of their involvement and whether my aunt would be amenable to this course of action. Therefore, I waited for her to leave the room for a nap and then proceeded to type out the entire text on my phone. I posted it without pausing to consider the implications of my actions. In addition to recounting the events of that day, I also highlighted the ways in which my parents have consistently treated me unfairly and have consistently regarded me as inferior to my siblings. As I was typing out the post, I experienced a psychological breakdown. The content of the post not only exposed my parents but also revealed a deep emotional distress. By the time I published it, I was in tears. I turned off my phone for a while because I was afraid of the consequences. An hour or so later, I tried to read a book but could not focus. My aunt then woke up and rushed into the living room where I had been sitting. Upon arrival at her residence, she inquired of me in a composed manner whether I had posted something that I was certain was true. I informed her that I had indeed done so, and that was the end of the matter. I then proceeded to switch on my mobile telephone, where I discovered that the post had been seen by several members of our family. I received a considerable number of text messages from my parents and even from my sister. In the meantime, a great many of my relatives had commented on the post, expressing their support for me. Some of them had even sent me text messages and reached out to me in person to tell me so. I was consistently reassured that they would be there for me if I needed assistance. This was a source of encouragement and positive effect. However, upon reviewing my parents' messages, I discovered a different narrative. Their messages were filled with hate and anger, and it was evident that they were not pleased with my actions. They demanded that I remove the post, and my father had even gone as far as to say that I should never have been born. These messages were hurtful, but not entirely unexpected. My mother's messages were similarly critical, and the only one that differed was the tone. Those who were slightly different were my sisters. She did not speak much, but she informed me that she would like to speak to me in person if it were possible. She then left the matter at that. I was unsure of how to respond to her, and I was overwhelmed by the number of people I had to respond to. I therefore kept my phone aside for the next couple of days. I did not speak to anyone, but I did block my parents because I had no intention of talking to them anymore. I was aware that they were from a legal standpoint, my parents were obliged to continue providing financial support until I reached the age of 18. Beyond that, I saw no reason to engage in further communication with them. My aunt was also supportive of my decision. If my father attempted to contact her in the following days, she did not inform me. We simply ignored the incident, which indicated that she was on my side and in support of my actions. This was sufficient for me, as it was all the support I needed or wanted for the past week. I had minimal contact with her. My parents showed up outside my school today, while I was about to leave. They appeared angry. My friends were aware of the situation between me and my parents, so they accompanied me outside. They formed a human shield around me, so I wouldn't have to interact with my parents if I didn't want to. However, they continued to yell my name, and I was forced to respond. I approached both of them and informed them that I no longer wished to have any contact with them. They did not acknowledge my assertion and demanded that I return home with them immediately. I was perplexed by their sudden insistence on my return, given their previous assertion that I was of no consequence to them. It appeared to me that they were attempting to salvage their image and reputation among their family members. I informed them that I would not accompany them until they provided an explanation for their actions. The sudden change in demeanor was perplexing. On the one hand, they appeared displeased, yet on the other, they still expressed a desire for my return. They informed me that they did not want my friends to overhear, so I requested a moment to speak with them privately. Once my friends had departed, my parents disclosed their intention to take me back. They explained that they had been unable to contact me and that I needed to return so that they could receive their inheritance. I was informed that, subsequent to my posting, the entire family had become aware of the situation. My grandparents, in particular, had been informed. My paternal grandparents are affluent, and they threatened my father, indicating that if he persisted in treating me poorly, he would forfeit his inheritance. They had been informed that, if they did not reconcile with me, treat me better, and ensure that I was loved and cared for, my father and mother would not receive the inheritance to which they were entitled. My aunt was the primary caretaker of my family, despite the fact that she was not obligated to do so. My father was unable to afford to lose the inheritance, which was a significant amount of money. My parents had a decent combined income, but I am aware that had I been in their position, I would have also desired the same outcome for myself. The only distinction is that I would have possessed sufficient intelligence to refrain from implying that I was doing them a favor by suggesting that they would accept me back into their home. It was evident that they were acting for their own benefit and not for my sake. Even so, they lacked the capacity to demonstrate a willingness to allow me to reside with them. Consequently, I informed them that I was indifferent to the outcome of their inheritance dispute and departed without further discussion. Despite their protests, I proceeded to my aunt's residence by bus and informed her of the incident at school. She appeared displeased, indicating her intention to prevent a recurrence of the situation. I contacted my lawyer to discuss the possibility of modifying my custody arrangement. It is important to note that my parents retained certain rights over me, and this must be addressed if I wish to reside with my aunt. Additionally, I expressed my gratitude to my grandparents for their efforts to resolve this matter. However, I also informed them that I was reluctant to return to living with my parents, given the experience of spending a few days with my aunt. I felt that my previous living arrangement with my parents had been oppressive, and I was eager to explore other options. Despite my continued hope for change, the situation remained unchanged. My grandparents lived in different cities, so we rarely met in person. However, whenever we did, my parents exhibited exemplary behavior at family gatherings during the holidays. This was to prevent any knowledge of my actual treatment at home from reaching them. While I was not subjected to overt cruelty, I was rather ignored and avoided. On the surface, everything seemed fine. However, if people spent a couple of days at my parents' house, they would quickly realize that they were mostly pretending. I was not present at the time of the incident and was solely concerned with the welfare of my sister. Following her pregnancy, my involvement in the situation intensified, leading to my complete exclusion. I subsequently informed my grandparents of the circumstances, who reassured me that if I wished to reside with my aunt, they would facilitate that outcome. Furthermore, they pledged to ensure that all my needs were met, including financial support. This conversation brought me a sense of optimism, as it appeared that my situation was finally improving. However, this optimism was short-lived. A few hours ago, I received an email from my father. It was not hateful or mean, but rather disappointing. He stated that there was no need for me to post what had happened online and make it so public when the word of what had happened would have reached my grandparents anyway through my. Now, along with my grandparents being upset with them, they also have to deal with a great deal of hate from their relatives and their being ostracized, which seems unfair. He told me that even some of his co-workers found out about this because the post was public and it had shown up on their feed since he was tagged in it. This wasn't a good look for him at work, and what I'd done had just caused a great deal of unnecessary drama in their lives. The workers were made aware of the situation due to the public nature of the post and its appearance on their feed, given that he had been tagged in it. This was perceived as a negative reflection on his professional conduct, and the incident had resulted in a significant amount of unnecessary drama in their lives, according to my account. The aforementioned post included details about my parents' request for me to leave the house and move in with my aunt on my 16th birthday, due to my sister was pregnant, and they needed my room for the baby. Before I address the incident itself, I would like to express my gratitude to everyone who took the time to read my post and leave a comment. Your kind words mean a great deal to me. To answer some of the questions that have been raised, many of you seem to have regarding why I did not leave my parents' house before this incident and why I waited for I had not yet been asked to leave by my parents, particularly given the willingness of my grandparents and aunt to assist. The reason for this is that I was not treated cruelly, as I had previously stated in my original post. I was never physically abused, but I was simply ignored and unwanted. This is a form of mistreatment, but for me, I was simply grateful that I was not being beaten or spoken to badly. I had a roof over my head and food to eat, so I convinced myself that I was doing just fine and that it was not important for me to actually feel loved. I did not realize that I was being neglected because it had become so normalized for me. I also did not approach my family for help because I did not want to burden them. I was also worried about what would happen if they refused to help me. What would be the consequences of my parents refusing to assist me and subsequently discovering that I had sought help from another source? It would undoubtedly have a negative impact on my standing within the family. My parents are highly concerned with maintaining a positive public image, and I was acutely aware of this. Consequently, I chose to remain silent about my situation and to bear the burden of my difficulties alone. My aunt was not willing to offer me accommodation, as she was concerned about offending my parents. Furthermore, she was uncertain as to whether I would be amenable to residing with her. Consequently, this arrangement was not proposed earlier. However, given the circumstances that have transpired, it can be argued that this outcome was optimal. While the timing may have been somewhat delayed, it was ultimately beneficial. She is currently engaged in discussions with a legal professional with the objective of transferring custody rights to her. This will undoubtedly be a challenging endeavor, particularly given the potential resistance from my parents. It is unlikely that my parents will relinquish their rights, given the potential impact on the inheritance. Nevertheless, even if this matter proceeds to court, I am confident that my grandparents and aunt will support me. My aunt has been particularly forthcoming in expressing her regret for my lack of attention at home and her willingness to engage in a more open dialogue. I am pleased to report that the atmosphere between me and my family is now much more cordial. I am also optimistic about the future. In addition, my sister has expressed a desire to meet me in person, which I am open to considering. However, I am unsure how to proceed, given that she has not been particularly kind to me in the past. My sister had adopted the same behavior that my parents had. She had been distant from me for most of my life, but if she had to talk to me, she was generally nice. I believe that the whole idea of kicking me out so that her boyfriend and child could live with her and our parents was her idea. This upset me, as it meant that she was going to start treating me badly. I sought to ascertain her true character, which I perceived to be somewhat unkind. Our relationship was somewhat strained, yet I still held a fondness for her, as she was the only one who would speak to me in a kind manner. I did not blame her for my parents' preference, as I understood that it was not her fault. 3 days ago, she sent me a text message, requesting my presence. I decided to call her and inquire about her intentions. I had not planned to return home, presuming that she would be there. However, she informed me that she was residing with her boyfriend at the time and was not well enough to leave the house. She requested my presence to discuss various matters pertaining to the family. She stated that she had a number of concerns that she wished to discuss with me. I went to see her out of curiosity. Upon my arrival, she apologized for never speaking up for me. She was aware that our parents favored their other child, and she felt that they had ignored her achievements in favor of celebrating her sisters. She felt that she was the least wanted child in the family, but she never did anything to remedy the situation. She simply never felt comfortable speaking up. She did not inform our parents about this, so she simply allowed the situation to continue. Given that I appeared to be adjusting well to the treatment I was receiving, she felt less inclined to speak up. She had now realized that the situation was rather problematic and wanted to see a change. Consequently, she apologized to me. She also informed me that the living arrangement had not been discussed with her by our parents. She was taken aback to learn that she was being evicted to make room for the new baby and her boyfriend. She had no inkling that this was going to happen. Her plan had been to live with our parents until the baby was a few months old, after which she would move in with her boyfriend. She had wanted to move out earlier, but had stayed only at our parents' house. Nevertheless, after my post, she came to recognize that this untenable situation could not continue. She moved out within a week. She had a significant dispute with our parents over her decision to move out, as they believed it was a poor choice. As a result, they have not spoken to her since. She was accused of being ungrateful and selfish, which she strongly denies. She had never promised our parents anything. Furthermore, they assumed things without evidence, which ultimately proved to be a futile exercise. Ultimately, my parents lost both their children, but at least she apologized to me for being a bad sister and a bad person in general. I forgive her for this because I believe that choosing to be unforgiving is not a constructive approach. We discussed the matter. She informed me that, from this point onward, she would be there for me regardless of the circumstances. This was a positive development. It has been approximately 1 week since my original post, and I have not yet received a response from my parents. It is likely that they have abandoned their efforts to re-establish contact. I am confident that my grandparents will continue to support me. It is likely that this was the case, as they did call me in the middle to inform me that my parents would no longer be contacting me and that I did not need to worry about them showing up at my school or emailing me again. I had not informed them about the email that my father had sent, so it is reasonable to assume that my parents and grandparents must have discussed it. I am unaware of the specifics of the conversation, but I am confident that my parents have ceased their efforts to regain custody. In the 3 days since my last update, my aunt informed me that my parents have consented to relinquish their parental rights. She anticipates that the necessary paperwork will be completed in the near future, and she will assume responsibility for the legal aspects of my custody. I am currently in the process of obtaining custody. I am experiencing a range of emotions, including feelings of relief that I will finally have a home where I am not constantly perceived as unwanted and unneeded. However, I also feel a sense of emptiness and sadness about certain aspects of my life. I find it peculiar that this transition is finally occurring, yet I recognize that it is a positive development. This outcome aligns with my initial expectations. Update 3. I have now experienced a few weeks since my last update. Since my aunt assumed guardianship, I am now legally under her care. Additionally, I have learned that my parents relinquished custody due to pressure from my grandparents. Specifically, after I informed my grandparents of my refusal to return to living with them, they informed my parents that they would either lose their entire inheritance or be able to retain 50% of the inheritance they were expecting to receive. My parents initially relinquished custody and promised not to contact me again. It is evident that they were motivated by a desire to avoid further conflict. I am not surprised by their decision and, at this juncture, I am indifferent to the outcome. This turn of events has left me with the impression that I have narrowly escaped a more adverse outcome. I remain in communication with my sister, although my parents are attempting to re-establish contact. I am currently on good terms with her, but she has requested some time to herself in light of her imminent delivery. She has informed her family that she requires space and that they should refrain from contacting her daily. I am amused by the unfortunate state of affairs within her family, but I am content with my aunt's guardianship and that is my primary concern.